The entire ballroom went silent the moment billionaire Edward Bennet saw the silver necklace hanging from the maid's neck, because the woman who wore it 32 years ago had disappeared without a trace. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above the grand ballroom of the Bennett Foundation Hotel in downtown Chicago, while waiters in white gloves carried champagne across polished marble floors worth more than most Americans made in a year. Olivia Bennet kept her eyes lowered as she moved carefully between tables, balancing a silver tray filled with wine glasses while wealthy donors laughed beneath the sound of a live piano. At 58 years old, Olivia had spent nearly 3 decades working quietly inside the Bennet family's world, invisible to everyone except the staff. Tonight was supposed to be no different. "Watch where you're going," a sharp voice snapped behind her. Olivia turned just as Victoria Bennet stepped into her path wearing a custom black evening gown that probably cost more than Olivia's yearly salary. Victoria's cold blue eyes narrowed immediately. "Honestly, they'll let anybody work these events now." Olivia lowered her head politely. "I'm sorry, ma'am." But before she could step away, a man bumped into her shoulder from behind. One of the glasses tipped sideways, sending a splash of red wine across Victoria's designer sleeve. The entire conversation around them stopped instantly. Victoria stared down at the stain in horror before slowly lifting her eyes toward Olivia. "Are you kidding me?" she hissed loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Olivia's hands trembled slightly. "It was an accident." "An accident?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "Do you even understand how much this dress costs?" Several guests turned away awkwardly while others pretended not to stare. Olivia reached for a napkin. "Let me help clean it." Victoria slapped the napkin out of her hand. "Don't touch me." The ballroom grew painfully quiet. Near the stage, Marcus Bennet watched with detached amusement while executives whispered to one another. Olivia felt heat rising in her face, but she stayed silent. Years of working around wealthy families had taught her one rule. Above all else, rich people hated embarrassment, especially their own. Then Victoria suddenly grabbed the silver necklace resting against Olivia's collarbone. "And where exactly did you get this?" she demanded. Olivia froze instantly. The necklace had a small sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, delicate but unmistakably old. "It belonged to my mother," Olivia answered softly. Victoria rolled her eyes. "Looks fake." But before she could release it, another voice cut through the ballroom. "Victoria." Every head turned toward the staircase above the ballroom floor where Edward Bennet stood motionless beside the railing. Even at 72, Edward carried the kind of presence that silenced rooms without effort. His tailored tuxedo fit perfectly, but the color had drained from his face completely. His eyes were locked on Olivia's necklace. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. Olivia's breathing slowed. For a moment, the noise of the ballroom disappeared entirely. "I told her," Victoria interrupted impatiently, "it's probably fake." Edward ignored her completely. He descended the staircase slowly, never taking his eyes off the necklace. Guests began whispering immediately as the billionaire approached the maid standing alone beside a spilled glass of wine. Olivia felt her chest tighten when Edward stopped directly in front of her. "Answer me," he said softly. "Where did that necklace come from?" Olivia hesitated only a second. "My mother gave it to me before she died." Edward stared at her in silence so long that even Marcus lowered his drink. Then Edward whispered something nobody expected to hear. "That necklace belonged to a woman named Claire Whitmore." Olivia's fingers instinctively closed around the sapphire. "How do you know that name?" Edward looked like he had seen a ghost. Across the ballroom, Victoria's expression shifted from annoyance to confusion while Marcus slowly straightened in his chair. And for the first time in 30 years inside the Bennet family mansion, Olivia realized the people who ignored her every single day were suddenly terrified of her. The silence inside the ballroom lasted only a few seconds, but to Olivia it felt endless. Wealthy donors stood frozen beside untouched champagne glasses while musicians quietly stopped playing near the stage. Edward Bennet continued staring at the sapphire necklace around her neck as though he had been pulled backward through time. Victoria finally forced an uncomfortable laugh. Edward, this is ridiculous. It is just some old necklace. Edward did not even look at his wife. Where is your mother from? He asked Olivia quietly. Olivia swallowed carefully. Boston. Edward's jaw tightened immediately. Marcus noticed the reaction and slowly stepped closer. Father, he said calmly, you are making a scene. Edward ignored him too. What was her name? Olivia hesitated. Something about the way Edward looked at her made her suddenly nervous. Her name was Claire. The color drained from Edward's face again. Around the ballroom, whispers spread rapidly between guests. Olivia could feel dozens of eyes fixed on her now. She had spent 30 years learning how to disappear inside wealthy rooms, but suddenly she was standing at the center of one. Victoria crossed her arms impatiently. This is insane. Claire is not exactly a rare name. Edward finally looked toward his wife. Claire Whitmore is. Victoria's expression changed instantly. Marcus frowned. Who is Claire Whitmore? Edward stayed silent for several seconds before answering. Someone I knew a very long time ago. Olivia noticed the tension in his voice immediately. It was the voice of a man hiding something dangerous. Before anyone could speak again, Edward turned back toward Olivia. How long have you worked for this family? Almost 30 years, Olivia answered. Marcus stared at her sharply. You never told us your mother's name before. Olivia met his eyes calmly. Nobody ever asked. That answer made several guests exchange uncomfortable looks. Marcus opened his mouth to continue, but Edward interrupted him. Enough. His tone was cold enough to stop the entire room. Then he looked at Olivia again. Come to the estate tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. Victoria blinked in disbelief. Edward, that was not a suggestion, he said quietly. Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Sir, I do not understand what this is about. Edward's eyes lowered briefly toward the necklace again. Neither do I. Without another word, he turned and walked away through the ballroom while guests immediately burst into whispers the second he disappeared behind the stage curtains. Marcus remained standing beside Olivia, studying her carefully. You should probably tell us what game you are playing, he said softly. Olivia shook her head. I am not playing any game. My father does not react like that unless something matters. Olivia picked up the empty tray with steady hands even though her heartbeat had doubled. Then maybe you should ask him. Marcus watched her for another moment before walking away toward the private lounge where Victoria had already disappeared. Olivia could hear angry voices beginning to rise behind closed doors. The gala continued after that, but the atmosphere never recovered. Guests whispered while pretending not to stare at Olivia each time she crossed the ballroom. One older woman even approached her near the kitchen entrance. That necklace, the woman whispered nervously, where exactly did your mother get it? Olivia stepped back cautiously. Why does everybody suddenly care? The woman looked genuinely shaken. Because Claire Whitmore vanished in 1994. Olivia froze. What? People said she ran away. But after tonight, the woman glanced toward the private lounge where the Bennett family argued behind closed doors. I do not think that was true. Before Olivia could respond, the woman hurried away. 20 minutes later, Olivia finally left the hotel through the employee exit into the cold Chicago night. Rain had started falling lightly across the empty streets while black luxury cars lined the curb outside the gala entrance. Olivia wrapped her coat tighter and reached into her pocket for her apartment keys when she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Its headlights turned on the second she looked up. Then her phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. Olivia answered cautiously. Hello? A woman's voice spoke quietly on the other end. Do not go to the Bennett estate tomorrow. Olivia stopped breathing. Who is this? The voice lowered even further. If Edward Bennett finally recognized that necklace, your life is about to change forever. Then the call disconnected. Olivia stood alone beneath the rain outside the hotel for nearly a full minute, staring at her dark phone screen while traffic moved through downtown Chicago behind her. The anonymous woman's voice still echoed inside her mind. If Edward Bennett finally recognized that necklace, your life is about to change forever. Her hands tightened around her purse instinctively. Across the street, the black SUV remained parked with its headlights glowing through the rain. Olivia immediately turned and walked in the opposite direction instead of heading toward the train station. She had spent too many years around wealthy families not to recognize when something dangerous was unfolding behind polished smiles and expensive suits. 20 minutes later, Olivia unlocked the door to her small apartment on the north side of the city. The building was old, the hallways smelled faintly of dust and radiator heat, and the flickering lights in the stairwell had not been repaired in months. But after decades inside the Bennett family mansion, this tiny apartment was the only place that had ever truly belonged to her. Olivia locked the door quickly behind her and walked straight toward the wooden cabinet beside the kitchen window. She hesitated only a moment before opening the bottom drawer and pulling out a faded cardboard box wrapped carefully in cloth. Inside were dozens of old photographs, letters, and newspaper clippings her mother had hidden for years before she died. Olivia slowly removed one photograph from the top of the stack. The image showed a young woman with soft blonde hair standing beside a lake during summertime. Claire Whitmore. Olivia's mother looked almost identical to her at the same age. Same eyes. Same smile. Same silver necklace hanging around her neck. Olivia sat quietly at the kitchen table staring at the photo while rain tapped softly against the windows. Her mother had spent most of her life avoiding questions about the past. Whenever Olivia asked about her father, Claire always changed the subject immediately. But one memory suddenly returned with painful clarity. Olivia had been 12 years old when she first saw her mother cry over an old newspaper article. Some people destroy lives to protect their own, Claire had whispered back then before hiding the paper away forever. Olivia reached deeper into the box until she found the yellowed clipping folded carefully beneath several letters. Her heartbeat slowed the second she unfolded it. The headline read, "Chicago business heir engaged to socialite Victoria Langford." Beneath the headline was a photograph of a much younger Edward Bennett standing beside Victoria at a charity event in 1994. Olivia's eyes moved slowly across the article until she noticed something handwritten in blue ink along the edge of the paper. "You promised me you would tell the truth." Olivia froze. The handwriting belonged to her mother. A sudden knock at the apartment door made Olivia jump violently. The knock came again, calm and deliberate this time. Olivia quickly slid the newspaper back into the box and stood motionless. "Olivia," a man's voice called from outside the door. "It is Marcus Bennett." Olivia's chest tightened instantly. She moved cautiously toward the entrance but did not unlock it. "How did you find my address?" "You have worked for my family for 30 years, Marcus answered evenly. "That was not difficult." Olivia stayed silent. Marcus lowered his voice. "I just want to talk." After several seconds, Olivia finally opened the door halfway. Marcus stood alone in a dark overcoat with rain still dripping from his hair. Unlike the polished confidence he carried at the gala, tonight he looked tense. Distracted. Curious. His eyes immediately drifted toward the necklace again. "My father has not slept all night," Marcus admitted quietly. "He locked himself inside his office the second we got home." Olivia crossed her arms carefully. "What does that have to do with me?" Marcus studied her face for a long moment before speaking again. "Because I have never seen Edward Bennett afraid before tonight." Olivia felt a chill move through her body. Marcus slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. "I found this in my father's private safe an hour ago." Olivia took the picture cautiously. The moment she looked at it, her blood ran cold. The photograph showed Edward Bennett standing beside Claire Whitmore 32 years earlier. And in Claire's arms was a baby wrapped in a white blanket. Olivia stared at the photograph so long that Marcus finally stepped inside the apartment and quietly closed the door behind him. Rain continued tapping against the windows while the old radiator hissed softly beside the kitchen table. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Olivia could not take her eyes off the baby in Claire Whitmore's arms. The infant's face was partially hidden beneath a white blanket, but the date written in the corner of the photograph immediately caught her attention. October 14, 1993. Olivia's birthday. Her fingers tightened around the picture. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Marcus removed his coat slowly. "From a locked box inside my father's office safe." Olivia looked up sharply. "Why were you searching through your father's safe?" Marcus gave a humorless smile. "Because rich families do not survive for generations without secrets." He walked farther into the apartment, glancing around the modest room with obvious discomfort. "After tonight, I wanted answers before my mother started destroying evidence." Olivia lowered the photograph carefully onto the table. "You think your father had a relationship with my mother?" Marcus met her eyes directly. "I think my father loved your mother." The room fell silent again. Olivia suddenly remembered countless strange moments from the past 30 years working for the Bennett family. The unexplained raises. Edward personally intervening whenever another employee tried firing her. The way he sometimes stared at her during holidays as though he wanted to say something but never could. At the time, Olivia had assumed guilt or pity. Now she was no longer sure. Marcus slowly sat across from her. "There is more." Olivia looked uneasy immediately. Marcus reached into his pocket again and removed a folded document. "I found this with the photograph." Olivia opened the paper carefully. It was an old hospital billing. Statement from St. Catherine Medical Center dated October 1993. At the top of the form was Claire Whitmore's name. But lower on the page, another line made Olivia's stomach drop completely. "Father of child, Edward Bennett." Olivia stared at the document in shock. "No," she whispered. "That cannot be real." "I already checked the hospital records online before coming here," Marcus replied quietly. "Most files from that year were destroyed in a fire." Olivia slowly leaned back in her chair while memories flooded her mind. Her mother refusing to speak about Chicago. Her mother crying alone at night. Her mother warning her never to trust wealthy people. Marcus watched her carefully. "Did Claire ever tell you who your father was?" Olivia shook her head slowly. "Never." "Then maybe she had a reason." Olivia stood abruptly and moved toward the kitchen window. Her breathing had become uneven. Outside, headlights reflected across the wet streets below. "This is insane," she said softly. "I worked for your family almost half my life." Marcus followed her with his eyes. "Which means my father kept you close for 30 years. Olivia turned toward him sharply. "Why would he do that?" Marcus hesitated. "Maybe guilt." Then after a pause, he added quietly, "or protection." Olivia looked away immediately. The idea felt impossible. Absurd. Yet deep down, something inside her had started connecting pieces she never understood before. Marcus suddenly pulled out his phone after it vibrated. The second he looked at the screen, his expression darkened. "What is it?" Olivia asked nervously. Marcus stood slowly. "My mother just froze all access to my father's private accounts." Olivia frowned. "Why?" Marcus looked directly at her. "Because she knows exactly who Claire Whitmore was." Before Olivia could respond, another notification appeared on Marcus's phone. He stared at it silently for several seconds. "This just came from our family attorney," he said slowly. "My father cancelled tomorrow morning's board meeting." Olivia crossed her arms uneasily. "So?" Marcus's voice lowered. "Edward Bennett has not missed a board meeting in 32 years. Olivia felt another chill move through her body. Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Something happened between your mother and my father in 1994. What kind of something? Marcus looked toward the photograph on the table again. The kind powerful people spend millions trying to bury. Suddenly Olivia's apartment buzzer rang loudly downstairs. Both of them froze instantly. Marcus frowned. Are you expecting someone? Olivia shook her head. The buzzer rang again. Then a third time. More aggressive now. Marcus walked carefully toward the window overlooking the street below. The moment he looked down, his expression hardened completely. Do not answer the door, he said quietly. Olivia's chest tightened. Why? Marcus stepped away from the window slowly. Because my mother's driver is downstairs. The apartment buzzer continued echoing through the hallway downstairs while Olivia and Marcus stood frozen inside the small living room. Rain streaked down the windows, blurring the city lights outside into pale reflections across the floor. Marcus moved away from the window slowly, keeping his voice low. My mother never sends her driver anywhere personally unless she is desperate. Olivia folded her arms tightly. Maybe she just wants to talk. Marcus gave a cold laugh. Victoria Bennett does not talk. She controls. The buzzer rang again. Longer this time. Olivia's heartbeat quickened. If she knows I have these documents, then we already have a problem, Marcus interrupted quietly. He walked toward the kitchen table and picked up the photograph of Claire Whitmore holding the baby. My mother protected the Bennett family image for 32 years. She will not allow some forgotten secret to destroy everything now. Olivia stared at the photograph in his hands. Forgotten secret. The word stung more than she expected. Before she could answer, her phone suddenly lit up on the counter. Edward Bennett calling. Marcus looked at the screen immediately. Answer it. Olivia hesitated only a second before pressing the button. Hello? Edward's voice sounded strained and exhausted. Olivia, are you alone? She glanced toward Marcus. No, silence filled the line briefly. Then Edward spoke again. Quieter this time. You cannot trust anyone in that family right now. Marcus rolled his eyes slightly but stayed silent. Olivia stepped farther from him instinctively. What is happening? Edward exhaled heavily. There are things you do not understand yet. Then explain them. Another pause. Olivia could hear voices in the background, muffled and tense. Did Marcus show you the photograph? Edward finally asked. Olivia's grip tightened around the phone. Yes. And the hospital record? Yes. Edward's breathing slowed noticeably. Then you already know enough to be in danger. Marcus frowned immediately at those words. Olivia lowered her voice. Danger from who? Edward answered without hesitation. Victoria. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Olivia pressed the phone tighter against her ear. Why would your wife care about me? Edward's voice became painfully quiet. Because if the truth comes out, everything Victoria built her life around disappears. Marcus stepped closer. Put the phone on speaker. Olivia ignored him. What truth? She asked. But before Edward could answer, another voice suddenly exploded through the phone line. Who are you talking to? Victoria Bennett. Olivia froze instantly. Edward lowered his voice sharply. I will call you back. The line disconnected. Marcus stared at Olivia. What did he say? Olivia looked unsettled. He thinks your mother is hiding something. Marcus laughed bitterly. That is the first honest thing my father has said in years. Downstairs, a car door slammed shut outside the building. Marcus immediately returned to the window and looked down again. Too late. Olivia walked beside him carefully. Below them, Victoria Bennett herself stepped out of the black SUV beneath a large umbrella while the driver held the apartment entrance open for her. Even from 4 stories above, Victoria carried the same cold elegance she had displayed at the gala earlier that night. Expensive coat. Perfect posture. Controlled expression. But now Olivia noticed something new beneath the polished appearance. Fear. Victoria disappeared into the apartment building seconds later. Marcus turned toward Olivia immediately. Listen. Carefully. My mother will pretend this is about protecting the family. It is not. Olivia crossed her arms nervously. Then what is it about? Marcus's jaw tightened. Inheritance. Olivia stared at him in confusion. I do not understand. Marcus looked directly into her eyes. Neither did I until tonight. He reached into his coat pocket again and pulled out another folded paper. This was attached to the hospital record. Olivia unfolded it slowly. At the top of the page was the Bennett Family Trust logo. Beneath it, one sentence had been highlighted in blue ink. In the event of a biological heir unknown at the time of filing, all inheritance rights immediately transfer upon verification of identity. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus spoke quietly. If Edward Bennett is your father, the sound of high heels approaching outside the apartment door stopped him mid-sentence. Then someone knocked softly. Calmly. Politely. Victoria Bennett's voice followed immediately afterward. Olivia, she said through the door. I think it is time we finally talked about your mother. The apartment hallway became completely silent after Victoria Bennett's voice echoed through the door. Olivia stood frozen beside the kitchen table while Marcus stared toward the entrance with obvious tension. Another soft knock followed. Olivia, Victoria said calmly, I know Marcus is inside. Marcus muttered under his breath. Of course she does. Olivia looked uncertain. Maybe we should not open the door. Marcus shook his head immediately. If you ignore her, she will come back with lawyers tomorrow morning. Victoria spoke again before Olivia could answer. I came alone. I only want 10 minutes. Marcus laughed quietly. That is usually how disasters begin in this family. Olivia hesitated several seconds before finally walking toward the door. She unlocked it carefully but kept the chain attached. Victoria Bennett stood beneath the dim hallway light wearing an expensive cream-colored coat with rainwater still glistening across the shoulders. Her makeup remained flawless despite the late hour, but her eyes looked exhausted in a way Olivia had never seen before. Victoria glanced past Olivia immediately. Marcus. Mother. The tension between them felt cold enough to freeze the hallway itself. Victoria looked back toward Olivia. Please. Olivia slowly removed the chain and opened the door wider. Victoria stepped inside without another word, immediately surveying the apartment around her. Her expression revealed nothing, but Olivia could sense the discomfort beneath her polished composure. The Bennett family owned penthouses larger than this entire floor. Victoria finally turned toward the kitchen table where the photograph and hospital document still rested beside the lamp. The second she saw them, her face hardened. So, she said quietly, Edward finally destroyed all our lives. Marcus crossed his arms. That sounds dramatic. Victoria ignored him completely. Did he tell her the truth? Marcus replied coldly. We were hoping you would. Victoria looked at Olivia for a long moment before speaking again. Your mother was not supposed to stay in Chicago. Olivia felt anger rise immediately. That is the first thing you say about her? Victoria stepped closer slowly. Claire Whitmore arrived in this city when she was 24 years old. She worked at Bennett Financial during the early expansion years. Olivia frowned. My mother never worked in finance. No, Victoria answered softly. She worked directly for Edward. Marcus looked uneasy now. Mother, you wanted honesty, Victoria interrupted sharply. Now you will hear it. She turned back toward Olivia. Your mother and Edward fell in love before he married me. Olivia's chest tightened painfully. Victoria continued in a calm, measured voice that somehow made everything worse. Edward planned to leave the company temporarily and move with Claire to Boston. But Edward's father threatened to cut him out of the family fortune completely if he walked away. Marcus stared at his mother in disbelief. Grandfather knew? Victoria gave a bitter smile. Charles Bennet knew everything. Olivia slowly shook her head. No. My mother would have told me. Victoria's eyes softened slightly for the first time. Claire wanted to protect you from this family. Marcus walked toward the table abruptly. Then why did she disappear? Victoria's expression darkened instantly. Because she found out she was pregnant 2 weeks before our engagement announcement. The apartment fell silent. Olivia felt her pulse pounding in her ears. Victoria lowered her voice further. Edward begged Claire not to leave Chicago. But Claire realized what the Bennet name really meant. Power. Control. Image. She looked directly at Olivia. She knew your life would never belong to you if the family discovered the child. Marcus stared at his mother carefully. So what happened? Victoria hesitated for the first time since entering the apartment. Claire vanished before the wedding. Olivia folded her arms tightly. You are lying. Victoria met her eyes calmly. I wish I was. Olivia pointed toward the photograph angrily. Then why did Edward keep pictures of her hidden for 32 years? Victoria's expression cracked slightly. Pain flashed across her face before disappearing again. Because Edward never stopped loving her. Marcus looked stunned. And you stayed with him anyway? Victoria gave a hollow laugh. You think wealthy marriages are built on love? Nobody answered. Victoria slowly reached into her purse and removed a thin manila envelope. She placed it carefully onto the kitchen table beside the hospital document. I did not come here to fight with either of you. Olivia stared at the envelope nervously. What is that? Victoria looked directly at her. DNA test authorization papers signed by Edward Bennet himself 3 hours ago. Marcus froze instantly. Olivia could barely breathe. Victoria's voice dropped almost to a whisper. Your father wants proof. Olivia stared at the DNA documents on the kitchen table while thunder rolled faintly across the city outside. The apartment suddenly felt too small for the truth pressing in from every direction. Marcus remained silent beside the window with his jaw tight, while Victoria stood perfectly composed near the door like someone delivering business terms instead of destroying 32 years of hidden history. Olivia finally looked up. You expect me to agree to this tonight? Victoria answered immediately. No. Edward expects it. Olivia laughed once under her breath, but there was no humor in it. Interesting timing. 30 years working for your family and suddenly I matter because of a blood test. Victoria's eyes sharpened slightly. You mattered long before tonight. Marcus turned toward his mother. Then why did nobody tell me? Victoria looked at him calmly. Because your father spent decades trying to bury his guilt. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting right now. Olivia slowly picked up the authorization papers. Edward Bennet's signature sat at the bottom in dark blue ink. Real. Careful. Deliberate. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the date and time. Signed at 11:14 p.m. Only an hour earlier. Olivia looked back toward Victoria. Does Edward really believe I am his daughter? Victoria hesitated before answering. Edward has believed it for years. The room went silent again. Marcus stared at his mother in disbelief. What? Victoria exhaled slowly, as though exhausted by secrets she no longer wanted to carry. About 6 years after Claire disappeared, Edward hired private investigators to search for her. They eventually found records placing Claire in Boston with a young daughter. Olivia felt her heartbeat stop for a second. Me. Victoria nodded once. Edward wanted to contact you immediately. Marcus frowned. Then why did he not? Victoria looked away briefly. Because by then, Claire was dying. Olivia's eyes widened instantly. No, Victoria's voice softened for the first time that night. Your mother had already been diagnosed with cancer. Olivia gripped the edge of the table tightly as memories flooded back into her mind. Hospital rooms. Medical bills. Claire growing weaker each month while refusing help from anyone. Victoria continued carefully. Edward flew to Boston without telling anyone. He saw Claire one last time. Olivia stared at her in shock. My mother never told me that. Claire made him promise not to. Marcus looked genuinely confused now. Why would she do that? Victoria answered quietly. Because Claire knew exactly what the Bennet family could do to a child connected to the company fortune. Olivia's breathing became uneven. So Edward just watched my life from a distance? No, Victoria replied softly. He paid for it. Olivia froze. Marcus slowly lowered his eyes. Victoria continued, the scholarships. Your mother's medical bills. Your apartment after college. The anonymous trust account that covered your expenses during hard years. Olivia shook her head repeatedly. No. My mother told me she saved that money. Victoria gave a sad smile. Claire protected Edward until the very end. Olivia suddenly remembered something else. The day she first applied for housekeeping work at the Bennet estate 30 years earlier. She had no experience. No references. Yet Edward himself approved her employment within 24 hours. Olivia whispered almost to herself, he knew. Victoria nodded slowly. The moment he saw your face. Marcus looked disturbed now. So my father hired his own daughter as household staff? Victoria closed her eyes briefly. Edward believed keeping you close was the only way to protect you without exposing the truth. Olivia felt anger rising beneath the shock now. Protect me, she said sharply. I spent years cleaning your dishes while you treated me like I was invisible. Victoria's expression hardened again. Do not mistake me for Edward. I did not know the full truth until tonight. Marcus looked at his mother carefully. You are lying again. Victoria turned toward him slowly. What does that mean? Marcus stepped closer. You already knew about Claire Whitmore before the gala. That was obvious. Victoria stayed silent. Marcus continued, the second you saw the necklace, you panicked. Olivia looked between them nervously. What are you talking about? Marcus's eyes never left his mother. Tell her the part about the missing hospital records. Victoria's face went completely still. And for the first time all night, Olivia realized Victoria Bennet was actually afraid. Victoria Bennet remained perfectly still beside the kitchen table while rain continued falling outside the apartment windows. Marcus watched his mother carefully, waiting for an answer she clearly did not want to give. Olivia felt tension tightening through the room like invisible wire. What missing hospital records? Olivia finally asked quietly. Victoria lowered her eyes briefly before speaking. The fire at St. Catherine Medical Center in 1998 destroyed most maternity records from that year. Marcus folded his arms. That is the public story. Victoria looked irritated now. It is also true. Not completely, Marcus replied coldly. He walked toward the kitchen counter and pulled out his phone. 3 months ago, I hired a private forensic accountant to investigate irregular payments connected to Bennet Holdings. Victoria's face hardened immediately. You investigated your own family? Marcus ignored the question. The investigator found large donations made to St. Catherine Medical Center shortly before the fire. Olivia looked between them nervously. What does that mean? Marcus stared directly at his mother. It means someone paid to erase records. The silence afterward felt suffocating. Olivia slowly turned toward Victoria. Tell me he is wrong. Victoria said nothing. Olivia's heartbeat began pounding again. Tell me. Victoria finally looked up, her composure beginning to crack for the first time. You do not understand what this family was like back then. Marcus laughed bitterly. That sounds dangerously close to a confession. Victoria's eyes flashed sharply toward him. You think your grandfather would have allowed Edward to publicly destroy the Bennet name over a secret child? Olivia whispered, secret child. Victoria softened slightly when she looked back at Olivia. Claire Whitmore was already pregnant when Edward announced our engagement. If the board of directors discovered that, the company stock would have collapsed overnight. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. So grandfather erased hospital files to protect the company? Victoria's voice lowered. Charles Bennet protected power. That was all he ever cared about. Olivia suddenly felt sick. My entire life was hidden because of a stock price? Victoria closed her eyes briefly. No. Your life was hidden because wealthy families survive by controlling narratives. Marcus looked disgusted. That is the most Bennet thing I have ever heard. Olivia slowly sat down at the table, overwhelmed by the weight of everything unfolding around her. Her mother had spent decades struggling alone while one of the richest families in America secretly watched from a distance. The realization felt unbearable. Victoria spoke carefully now. Claire agreed to disappear voluntarily. Olivia looked up instantly. Why would she do that? Victoria answered quietly. Because she loved Edward enough to believe his family would destroy him. Marcus scoffed. Convenient explanation. Victoria snapped back immediately. You were not alive back then. You have no idea what your grandfather was capable of. Marcus stepped closer. Then tell us. Victoria stared at him silently for several seconds before finally speaking. Charles Bennet offered Claire money to leave Chicago permanently. Olivia felt anger rising again. Did she take it? Victoria shook her head slowly. Claire tore the check in half. Olivia looked stunned. Victoria continued, that was the moment Charles Bennet decided she had become a threat. Marcus frowned immediately. What did grandfather do? Victoria hesitated. He arranged for Claire's employment records to disappear. He pressured landlords not to rent to her. He used private investigators to monitor her movements after she left Chicago. Olivia stared at her in disbelief. My mother never told me any of this. Victoria's expression softened slightly again. Because Claire wanted you to grow up normal. Olivia laughed quietly through the shock. Normal, she whispered. I spent my entire life wondering why my mother looked terrified every time wealthy people came near us. Nobody spoke after that. The only sound in the apartment was rain against glass and distant traffic below the building. Then Marcus's phone suddenly vibrated again. He looked down at the screen and his expression changed instantly. What happened? Olivia asked nervously. Marcus stared at the message. The DNA lab already processed the emergency request. Victoria's face lost color immediately. Olivia could barely breathe. Marcus looked slowly from the phone toward Olivia. Results are available now. The room fell completely silent. Olivia's hands trembled against the edge of the table while Marcus opened the file carefully on his screen. Victoria looked away before he even finished reading. Marcus's voice dropped almost to a whisper. Edward Bennet is your biological father. Olivia felt the world around her suddenly go still. But before anyone could speak again, Marcus looked back down at the report and frowned deeply. Wait. Olivia's chest tightened. What? Marcus stared at the screen in confusion. There is another result attached to the file. Victoria closed her eyes instantly like she already knew what was coming. Marcus looked up slowly at his mother. Mother, his voice became dangerously quiet. Why does this report say I am not Edward Bennet's son? The apartment fell into complete silence after Marcus spoke. Rain continued falling outside, but inside the room nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Olivia stared at Marcus while the meaning of his words slowly settled over everyone like a collapsing ceiling. Victoria Bennet remained frozen beside the doorway with her eyes closed, as though she had spent years preparing for this exact moment. Marcus looked back down at the DNA report again, searching desperately for some mistake. No, he whispered. That is impossible. Olivia stood slowly from the table. Marcus, but he stepped backward immediately. Do not. His voice cracked for the first time all night. Just do not say anything yet. Victoria finally opened her eyes. Marcus, listen to me. He laughed bitterly without looking at her. You lied to me my entire life. I was protecting you. Marcus looked up sharply. From what? Victoria's voice trembled slightly now beneath the polished control she had maintained for decades. From becoming another casualty inside this family. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. So Edward knew? Victoria hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Marcus's face hardened instantly. He knew, he repeated quietly. Olivia felt sick watching the realization destroy him piece by piece. Victoria stepped closer carefully. Edward agreed to raise you as his own because we needed stability after the board transition. Marcus shook his head slowly. You are talking about my life like it was a business contract. Victoria whispered, in families like ours, sometimes it was. Marcus turned away from her completely. Olivia looked toward the DNA report still glowing on his phone screen. Edward Bennett is your biological father. The words felt unreal even now. Her entire identity had shifted in less than 24 hours. 30 years cleaning hallways inside the Bennett mansion while secretly belonging to the family itself. Olivia suddenly remembered every holiday dinner where Edward silently watched her from across the room. Every promotion. Every quiet moment where he almost spoke but stopped himself. He had known all along. Marcus finally looked toward Olivia again, but this time his expression carried something entirely different. Not arrogance. Not suspicion. Pain. You spent your whole life outside this family, he said quietly. And somehow you were the only real Bennett in the room. Olivia did not know how to answer. Victoria lowered herself slowly into a chair, looking older than she had only an hour earlier. Your biological father was a man named Daniel Mercer, she admitted softly to Marcus. He worked for Bennett Holdings in the early 90s. Marcus frowned. Does he know? Victoria's eyes filled briefly with emotion before she looked away. Daniel died 20 years ago. Another silence followed. Olivia suddenly realized the empire surrounding the Bennett family had been built almost entirely on hidden truths. Fake appearances. Controlled narratives. Carefully buried scandals. Marcus rubbed a hand across his face slowly. So grandfather erased Olivia's existence to protect the company, he said quietly. And father agreed to raise me to protect the marriage. Victoria whispered, nothing was ever that simple. Marcus looked directly at her. Then explain what part of this was honest. Victoria had no answer. Olivia finally stepped toward the window overlooking the rain-covered streets below. Chicago looked cold and distant beneath the midnight lights. Somewhere across the city, Edward Bennett was probably sitting alone inside a mansion filled with wealth powerful enough to influence governments, yet completely unable to fix the damage created by one decision made 32 years earlier. Olivia suddenly understood something her mother once told her as a child. Rich people spend their lives protecting what they own because deep down they know money cannot protect what they lose. Behind her, Marcus quietly placed the phone back onto the table. What happens now? He asked. Victoria looked exhausted. Tomorrow morning the board will learn everything. Marcus laughed softly. The Bennett family stock is going to collapse. Olivia turned back toward them. I do not care about the company. Victoria looked at her carefully for several seconds before speaking. Edward does. Olivia reached for her coat hanging beside the door. Marcus frowned slightly. Where are you going? Olivia slipped the silver necklace beneath her collar gently. Home. Victoria stood immediately. Olivia, wait. Olivia paused near the doorway but did not turn around. Victoria's voice softened almost to a whisper. For whatever it is worth, your mother was the strongest person I ever knew. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. Then she opened the apartment door and stepped into the quiet hallway alone while thunder rolled across the city one final time. Inside the apartment, the Bennett family remained surrounded by millions of dollars, legal documents, and shattered identities. But for the first time in 32 years, Olivia Whitmore Bennett walked away from them carrying something none of them could buy back anymore. The truth.